So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Wherever you happen to be in the world today, welcome one and all to Coffee Talk. It is time once again for Coffee Talk Live, where we will be having a discussion about what is going on in the world today, taking a look at some clips from the news and having a little bit of dialogue with those of you who were able to join us for the live portion. And of course, you can find the live portion Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube at Coffee Talk Live at Prepper University. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Coffee Talk Chat, which I can no longer stream to because they changed the rules. You can find me on fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon as we get ready to dive into what is going on in the world today, see what's going on, have a little bit of discussion, as I said. And I do read through as many of the comments as is reasonable for the benefit of those of you who are listening and not able to see. And I'll go ahead and acknowledge some of those people. Dusty was here. She was sitting on the desk. She decided to leave when I started talking. I guess I'm too loud for her. Although we do have Monkey sleeping in the chair. There he is. You can see him today. He's in the gray chair, sleeping in the chair, having a little nap. Now I'll go ahead and say hello to some of the people that have chimed in. Donna Beaver is here, says, press the like button and share. Please do if you don't mind. Helter is here. Ragnar is here, as well as Raccoon, joining us here today as we get ready to dive into the realm of the ridiculous. And Zane is here as well. Spectre. Jane Spitfire. And she says she's addicted to the video show. I'm glad somebody is. You know, again, very suppressed channel. ScrewTube does not like me. They give me a very hard time. And Dragon is here as we get ready to get started. And we will start in Venezuela. Venezuela, what's left of it. Venezuela, because God knows you can't have anyone stealing an election, can you? No, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. So let's interfere with Venezuela and make their troubles even worse. Daily Caller article. Daily Caller, Venezuela's Maduro refuses to leave power as his political opponents come under threat of arrest. Why is that a surprise? Oh, and there is Brian joining us this afternoon. You just missed Dusty. She was sitting on the desk and she took off. So there you go. This is the climate right here in Venezuela. Things are not going well. Things have not been going well for some time. I love how half the people in the shot are filming with their cell phones, though. It's the modern world for you. So on to the article. President Nicolas Maduro has shown no signs of stepping down from power, even after likely losing the country's presidential elections last week, as his top political opposition faces potential arrest, according to several reports. Maduro, a socialist and widely viewed as a dictator, declared victory in Venezuela's presidential elections in late July, even as questions immediately arose as to the legitimacy of the results. The U.S. and some Latin American nations have refused to recognize Maduro as the winner. So they're not in Venezuela, so who the hell cares? Amid independent reports from the opposition showing that Edmundo Gonzalez, Maduro's primary competition in the race, actually won a majority of the votes, according to the Associated Press. But Maduro has thus far refused to admit his loss or step aside from power. And the government's top prosecutor issued a criminal investigation on Monday into Gonzalez and his party ally, Maria Corina Machado. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro speaks during a press conference to the international media about the presidential election at the Miraflores Presidential Palace in Caracas on July 31st. And I guess that's where that photo's from. I don't know. So, yeah, I mean, like Stalin said, it's not who votes, it's who counts the votes. And like we also showed, because I had put this image up before, that the Dominion voting machines had a really interesting trend that both Wisconsin and the presidential 2020 election, Wisconsin and was it Missouri? Not Missouri, Michigan, and the Georgia runoff election for the Senate that Raphael Warnock ran, presidential election for Maduro, all four of them charted identically according to the software, which is extremely suspicious. Jane says, did you hear Denver 3 cops fired due to texting about shooting immigrants and drones spy on a lady in California? Her home is too messy and canceled her home insurance. Yeah, California will do that. I did hear about the Denver texting. I didn't read the whole story though. But yeah, this is going to continue to be an issue. I think it's really suspicious that the Georgia runoff elections, our presidential election and this election, all used the same software for the election and all had almost an identical, and I showed the image here before, almost had an identical trend pictured. That's very significant. That is very significant. And yeah, he refused to leave, and so what? What are you going to do? Who's going to do anything? The United States? Are we going to go down there and kick him out? Is that what they're hoping for? We're going to go arrest him. And D'Lo has joined us. Glad you could make it. It's kind of funny how we want to point it out in other countries, but when this question of towards the elections in our own country, we're called conspiracy theorists and we're put on FBI watch lists for it. But maybe we'll go down there and instill democracy and install a leader like the U.S. likes to do, run around the world and install someone and call it democracy. And then we're not supposed to expect it happens here. Dragon says, of course he won't step down. He's a dictator. Dictators throughout history have never stepped down quietly. And Semperfi is here. Glad you could make it. He says that ScrewTube didn't notify him. I'm not surprised. I am not surprised, unfortunately. ScrewTube is not very nice to me. But those charts were very interesting. We looked at those a couple of times last week. But we're not supposed to believe it happens here. We're not supposed to believe they install people here. It really feels Biden was installed. It feels like Kamala is being installed. She went from being cringe to cool in 24 hours. Suddenly, the media loves her. And Puck is here. And Biden is crying. First time we've heard from him in like over a week. The world kind of forgot about him. And he's sitting there saying that the transition of power isn't going to be easy. It's not going to go well. Which is basically him saying he's positive Kamala will win and that Americans are going to think they got flim-flammed and it's going to be all hell breaking loose. That's what he thinks. That's what's going to happen. He thinks it's going to be a disaster when she's installed, which could very likely happen. How the hell do we know? How do we know? It feels that way, doesn't it? It feels that way, doesn't it? And what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? And what are we going to do about Venezuela? Why should we do anything about Venezuela? But they're going to try to drag us down there anyways. They will. And then how many fronts are we going to be on, militarily speaking? Places we have no business being. But we've been installing governments. The United States has been installing governments since Theodore Roosevelt. He was the first one, really. And he did it in Panama. He did it in Panama. Speaking of which, here's an article from Newsweek that says Tim Walz has been a disaster for Minnesotans. There's Tim Walz, the would-be, that would be the vice president if Kamala is elected. But as he's been, even though he doesn't have a very big footprint on the internet, as he's further exposed, he looks worse and worse. So here it is. It says, although Tim Walz is lauded as a champion for blue-collar America, a whip-smart social studies teacher in Mankato, Minnesota, and a dutiful member of Congress who voted faithfully on moderate legislation, the truth is that as governor of Minnesota, Walz has governed as a radical tyrant. That's Newsweek talking, who is very left-leaning these days. On immigration, crime, and education, Walz is considerably to the left of not only the average American, but the average elected Democrat. He is the vice presidential pick of the radical left. The Minnesota I remember from my childhood is no more. The state was home to 25% of all ISIS recruits in the United States, largely due to the deluge of immigrants from Somalia. It is now the largest Somali community outside of Somalia itself. Despite the subsequent increase in terrorist recruitment, carjackings, and the informal renaming of an entire neighborhood in Minneapolis to Little Mogadishu, Walz says the flood must continue. Refugees strengthen our communities, according to Walz in 2019. Under Walz's tenure, Minnesota has become a war zone. Once heralded as one of the least crime-ridden states in the nation, violent homicides in Minnesota are now up 71%. Carjackings in Minneapolis are up 458%. Lest anyone forget about the mostly peaceful George Floyd riots in 2020, here's a reminder of what those looked like. Police precincts burned to the ground, hard-earned businesses destroyed, and unprecedented violence. That is Tim Walz's public safety legacy in Minnesota. The other thing that's really bothering me about Tim Walz is that he's being constantly compared to Vance, militarily speaking, because Vance served in the Marines for 4 years, and from the National Guard perspective, Walz outranked him, and I'm hearing the spiel on this constantly. But the reality of it is that Walz was demoted. They say, oh, he ranked an E9, and it's like, yeah, before his demotion, he ranked an E9. He got reduced to an E8 when he refused deployment to Iraq. He wouldn't go. So when he goes up on stage and talks about, oh, when I carried weapons of war belong on the battlefield, not on the streets, because he wants to ban firearms, period. He never carried a weapon of war in a battlefield. He's never been on a battlefield. He's never been in a war zone. He never got further than Italy. And submitted for resignation with 2 years left to go on his contract. And they demoted him out while his men went on deployment and went into Desert Storm. I think it was Desert Storm, right? Somebody might know better than me that they can go ahead and mention in the comment section. Jane says England's having a time with riots and fires. I hear the kittens. Yeah, somebody, I think that was Dusty. I don't know why she was calling. She does that from time to time, actually, off track for a second, because Dusty's the one that was the pregnant kitten when we found her, because they can get pregnant at like 12 weeks. She was already pregnant. And from time to time, even though the kittens have all been, adopted by now, been like at least a year. She goes around to all the places that she nested them, calling like she's looking for them. Don't tell me these animals don't have feelings. I feel bad for her when she gets like that. And Puck had a comment on X liked by Elon Musk. Excellent. I don't know if anybody likes any of my comments or means at all. Semper Fi says that's the CIA's main function, installing governments. And Jane says humans riot and are violent when they want to change things. Sad to write this, but it's in the nature. Yeah, people are awful. And there's Kimberly joining us today, as well as Chillin' Dave. Glad you could get. Semper says Waltz is a disgrace, 100% stolen valor. I agree. He's been seen wearing Special Forces hat and has been called out. He wasn't in the Special Forces. He was not. But Puck says Waltz had to hold the rank for 2 years to retire at that rank. He was barely months into that position. Yeah, he had to retire it. He quit. He quit to avoid deployment and then got into politics. While his men, and that's the argument I've heard, and that's where somebody got, I saw a very impassioned speech from someone on the subject earlier today. The guy was so mad, and I understand. He was like, you had a command over men, and your men went into deployment, and you abandoned them. And I'm like, yeah, I could see that. I can see that. He violated the terms of the brothers in arms, as it were. He left them hanging. That's awful. That's awful, but that's Tim Waltz. The guy's nuts. The guy is nuts. And he's a fraud. He's a fraud. But what are you going to do? What can you do about it? Nothing really, except for not to vote for him. But I mean, the votes may already be arranged. We may be seeing a puppet government installed now. I mean, they got away with it so easily the last time, it seems. I have to say that. They got away with it so easily the last time. Why even hide it anymore? And you see, Monkey took off. He heard Dusty calling, and he went to see what was going on. So he left the room. Monkey left me all alone. I'm here by myself. As we jump to England. This is day 8, is it not? I don't know if anybody from the UK is in here yet. Chillin says nobody voted for her. Yeah, they didn't. BBC News. And it's really important to see the spin on all of this because they're calling it now race riots. Okay? Language is important. They're protesters. And Moki is here. Glad you could make it, Moki. If a feline comes in, I'll pick him up for you. It is disorderly. In certain cases, it can be considered a riot, especially where fires were started. Okay? But they're not race riots. These are people that are infuriated with their government for turning natural-born citizens of all nationalities, not just, quote, white people, into second-class citizens in their own home country and using taxpayer money to fund it. And they're fed up with it, and this is what happens. You know, there's a breaking point for everybody. For every society, there's a breaking point. But the BBC is calling it race riots. So are the So are the politicians out there. It's very reminiscent of January 6th, where it was, quote, an insurrection up until the video footage was released, and then they downgraded that to riot because they couldn't spin insurrection anymore. They lied to us. Spectre says, it gets me these types of people with that type of mindset would even join the military. He thought he was just gonna, kick back. He's in the reserves. I'll never have. Look at how many people during that time period wanted to be conscientious objectors, because they thought they were just going to do, weekend warrior. It'll be a cakewalk. I'll never get deployed to nothing. It'll probably be a hurricane and I'll be filling sandbags. Who gives a shit? And they were faced with the possibility of actual combat, and they shit themselves. This guy too. This guy too. Chillin says, wasn't it Churchill that says never let a good crisis go to waste? Was it Churchill? I don't recall. You might be correct. But this is the spin they're putting on. This is the spin that they're putting on. Thousands of counter-protesters rally after riots. Okay? So thousands of counter-protesters have rallied in towns and cities across England after a week of rioting and disorder. Gatherings in locations where anti-immigration protests have been expected, including North London, Bristol, and Newcastle, were largely peaceful as counter-protesters formed the bulk of the crowds. Police have been braced for further violence, with thousands of officers monitoring as many as 100 locations. The demonstrations followed days of riots initially sparked by misinformation online. Yeah. That the suspect in the fatal stabbing of 3 girls in Southport on the 29th of July was a Muslim asylum seeker. Mosques and hotels housing asylum seekers among places targeted over the last week, with some shops burned out and looted. On High Street across England, shop owners boarded up windows and closed early on Wednesday in anticipation of further violence. Nothing happened there, by the way. Immigration lawyers have been told by police to work from home after lists of solicitors, firms, and advice agencies were shared in chat groups as possible targets. Okay? And it goes on to say that more than 400 people have been arrested, blah, blah, blah. Now, here comes the big spin. Okay? Take a look at this image. I'm going to share it with you. Look at this image. All right. Notice anything interesting about that picture? And I'll describe it here in a moment, because I know some people are just listening. And Kimberly says they appreciate anyone who serves the country. However, they don't appreciate those who embellish their services or accomplishments. Yeah, I did this and that, blah, blah, blah. Let me pound my chest. Especially when they're adding stuff that didn't happen. And Puck says National Guard, not reserves. One state, the other's federal. Did I say the wrong one? I might have got it backwards. Here's what's interesting. Here's what's interesting about this picture. These are the counter protests, and they're pretending like this is organic response from the good citizens of the UK, let's put it that way, to the riots that have been taking place, the quote, end quote, race riots, which they are not race riots. That's not fair. And JJ confirms it was Churchill that said that, quoting Machiavelli. Machiavelli, who wrote The Prince, that was an interesting book. Yeah, and that is in Machiavelli, isn't it? Oh, Dusty's back. Dusty is back. This is not organic at all when half the people out are carrying the same sign. This is arranged. This is staged. The initial response was organic, which unfortunately led to some violence. But these protests have been set up. Anybody here ever see the Jackie Gleason film? Oh, what the hell was the name of it? Don't Drink the Water. Don't Drink the Water, 1969, adapted from a play that was written by Woody Allen. And Jane says, what do the signs say? Would you believe Black Lives Matter? I kid you not. The pink part of the sign. It's yellow and pink. Let me see if I can find a close-up. The pink part of that sign says, golly, hold still. The pink part says Black Lives Matter, and some of the pink signs say Stop the Right. And the yellow part says Refugees Welcome. Refugees Welcome. Okay. This is staged. Puck says intelligence agencies set up the, quote, protests. And Jane says that's not very original. No, not really. These people were brought together, given signs, and told where to go and what to do. Just like I was quoting alluding to the Jackie Gleason film, Don't Drink the Water. I think it was, Jane says, Stop the Right. The pink part says, some of them say have BLM slogans. Some of them say Black Lives Matter. Let me see if I can find some more images of it. I'm pretty sure that's what it said. Let's see if I can find it. If I can find clear images. There's a couple here that says, say no to Trump. That's interesting. Hey, I just made an interesting connection here. Hold on a second. Let me share this. Let me share this image. I was looking for the image and I found something more interesting. Here's a Trump protest. Look at the signs. Notice anything? Notice anything about the Trump signs? And this is in the United States. This is in the United States. The signs are the exact same format. Yellow on top, pink on the bottom, with the same fonts. How convenient is that? But again, back to the play, or back to the movie, Don't Drink the Water, if you've never seen it. It's a comedy. Yeah, Monkey says the same template, exactly. And he says, I don't understand why the counter-protest is going, what the is going to accomplish. Are they thinking if we do this, all the rioters will disappear? Well, it makes it appear as if the real England, the good England, kind of like on King of the Hill, there was Hank and Good Hank, for any fans of the show. According to Cotton, I always wanted a son named Hank. My name is Hank. Well, I'll call this one Good Hank. It pretends like it creates the illusion that what we've been seeing isn't how the majority of people in the UK actually feel. So they arrange for a protest to counter. But this is not organic. This is arranged. But again, back to it was a movie. It was based on a stage production that was written and produced by Woody Allen, if I remember correctly. It's a comedy about a baker on a family trip across Europe. in the 60s, and they try to arrest him. They think he's a spy because he's taking pictures in an Eastern Bloc country. And the mayor of that town, because he runs to the American embassy with his family to hide, and the mayor of that town goes out to round up protesters. Hey, we got protesting to do. I'll get the signs ready. Let's go. We're going to do like a level 5 this time. We'll step it up later. Because the whole thing, and even in the 60s, Woody Allen just being cheeky, they knew back then this kind of thing went on. Brian says, racist, how do you dumb socially programmed feminoids? Okay. And Puck says, lefties always use tricks to exaggerate numbers. Bob67 says, rioters accused of being far right. I call this lot fair and righteous. And JJ says, interesting that there are dump Trump signs in a UK protest. No, these signs are actually in the US. The dump Trump signs are on American soil, but it's the exact same sign, format, font, and everything as the ones currently being used in the UK. They've been manufactured by the same people. And that's a really interesting connection. That in the US, our protest signs are the exact same ones currently being used in the UK. And I'm like, who the hell's funding this? Who's funding these people? Because, again, they're not organic. It's not organic at all. And there's Fluke Man. Fluke Man, have you been brainwashed by the counter protests yet? Have they convinced you? Have they convinced you? That in reality, they really, the people in the UK are really actually for all of the illegal immigration? And JJ says, my apologies. No problem, JJ. No problem. Puck says, Britain is lost. Get out while you can. That's what Elon Musk thinks. That's what Elon Musk thinks. Now into the realm You know what's unfortunate about this? Before I open up the next article, the hardest thing about sitting here and doing this every day is looking at these articles and just seeing how dumb people are. This is how dumb they are. You know, I say it all the time. People are not that smart. And I call it out because I'm like, you know, just because they're not that smart doesn't mean you have to treat them like they are. Give people something to aspire to. Okay? And Bob says a lot of Palestinian flags could be seen yesterday. I bet. But just watching it in real time, how dumb and ignorant people are and can be. They don't even try. They don't even try. And also knowing that for the most part, it's our own countries, our own governments that are crushing the creativity out of us. And who's this? Dental Misorder says, never forget China declared people's war on the United States on May 15th and 18th in 2019, 10 months before your government shut down everything. Interesting. Jane says they spent the summer in Manchester, England, and the people there have sweet souls. That was back in the 70s, late 70s, and that her sister married a British guy. You wouldn't recognize it now. I'm sure you wouldn't. I grew up in Boston. I bet you I wouldn't recognize it now if I went there. The thing is that it's the creativity and the imagination and just the intelligence of people is crushed out of them. And it makes me think of the Genius study that was done by NASA. Anybody familiar with that one? Anyone's? And Jane says, you're right. Some people are dumb, just like opinions. Yeah. How does it go? Opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one. And I'll add to that, some of them really stink. But anyways, NASA did a study in the late 60s. And I think it was a 15-year study. And it went from, some of you might have heard of this. It's one of the longest studies in U.S. history, official studies. They wanted to take a group of kids like 3 years old and follow them from Head Start, which of course is state-run daycare, through to the 12th grade, to graduation. Okay, so Head Start, K1, K2, first grade through the 12th. Because most, you don't think about it, but most kids have spent 15 years in state school in the United States. If you started in Head Start, you spent 15 years in public school. Okay? And Tuck has joined us, as well as Kelly. Glad you could make it today, Kelly. All right. So they did a study that was about that long, and it was in the late 60s through to like the early part of the 80s, right? Following from Head Start through to 12th grade. And it was, I think, 1,600 kids. 1,600 kids. Let me throw that up there for dental. You can read that while I'm going on here. And when they tested the first group, when they tested these 1,600 children, I think it is. You can look this up, okay? I'm sure. I always encourage people, because most of the time I'm just talking off the top of my head here. I don't have a teleprompter or anything. So do research it when I talk about stuff. If you're curious about it, look it up. Look up NASA Genius study. I'm sure you'll find it. So when they did the initial tests, I think it was 98+% of the kids met the criteria for genius status at 3. And they were like, wow, did we just luck out? Did we hit the jackpot? Almost every single kid. 1,600 kids. Potential geniuses. That's incredible. And every single year, they got dumber and dumber and dumber till by graduation, 12th grade, less than 2% of them were even close to the percentile for the possibility of genius status. Okay? Very important study. No one talks about this. And Carrick has joined us. Thanks for joining us today, Carrick. Brian says, this lady at my job can't change a car tire, but calls everyone stupid. I'll tell you a story about that from Cumberland Farms here in a minute if I remember, when I used to work at Cumberland Farms. Now, what the NASA scientists who were running this study, their determination was that public school crushed the life out of them, that it stifled their creativity, their imagination, and held them back from the basics, reading, writing, and arithmetic, that would enable them to reach any kind of status on their own. That was NASA's determination, that public school crushed those kids. And that was how many years ago, and how much worse do you think it is now? Most people are dumb because our governments are helping them along, is my point. And I'll see if I can find that article tomorrow, and I'll try to share it if I remember. Brian, the car tire. When I worked at Cumberland Farms, it's a gas station. You know, it's kind of like Quick Trip, whatever. And that was in Brighton, Massachusetts. I worked there. Brighton, Massachusetts, right next to the firehouse. And we had the pumps outside, but of course it's self-service. Self-service pumps, right? And sometimes people struggle with them. And one woman in particular who was European, she had a European accent. She's out there, I don't know, she's having some kind of problem. And she comes in and yells at me. Okay, she's you're a very stupid man. You can see I'm having problem outside and you are not for helping me, right? You know, and I'm busy, man. I got a line of people. What do you want me to do? I'm there by myself. That's how it is most of the time, right? And I was like, lady, there's a big switch on that pump that says on and off. You can't figure it out, and I'm stupid. And then she ran out and got in her car and drove away. The people in line got a big kick out of that. They enjoyed that. Jane says, hey, read the book Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. Good book on how societies formed. And Puck says 19 on here. Is that a record? I don't know because I can't see your number. I get a combination number between the two channels, and the highest I've had is 60 between the both channels. And Jane wants people to hit the thumbs up. Please do if you don't mind. And Brian says that was in my Cumberland. I think I did probably mention that in the Cumberland Farms video I did a million years ago. I probably did. And Fluke Man says, wonder how many of those anti-racist, counter-protesting racists, but changed free Palestinian, harassed Jews and threatened them. I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did. But, you know, we'll get on to another story about corruption from our government. Are you shocked? You should be. You should be dismayed anyways. And Kimberly said, ever notice protesters and crisis actors are all the same people, different locations. They're paid. Who signs the checks? That's what I want to know. Tribune News Service article, Orlando city official used elderly woman's credit after failing to qualify for a home loan. There she is. She identity theft, I guess. There she is. She looks rough. Goodness. It says Orlando, Florida. After Orlando City Commissioner Regina Hill struggled to obtain a home loan, she used a document that bore signs of forgery to leverage an elderly constituent's superior credit for a government-backed mortgage, investigative records have shown. That document bears the name of a politically connected notary who is a friend and former campaign field director for Hill, according to documents and interviews recently released to the Orlando Sentinel from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement investigation. So not only did she commit forgery and identity theft, but the person she did it to was a friend who helped her. Yeah. Several irregularities mar the legal document, a power of attorney declaration that gave Hill authority to purchase the home on the shore of West Orlando's Lake Man in her own name and in the name of the elderly woman, yet Hill was allowed to proceed with the purchase of the Domino Drive property in August of 22. Robert Sinclair, the real estate agent who handled the transaction, told FDLE agents he thought Hill's position as an elected official made people involved in the real estate transaction feel like she could ruin them if she wanted to. So I guess she had been figured out early on, but she used her position, her political position, as leverage to intimidate people. She used it to intimidate people. Unbelievable. And Jane agrees that she looks rough and wants to know what a yellow ribbon means. If I remember correctly, it's solidarity with armed forces, isn't it? like where the song comes from, tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree, solidarity with armed forces. And but then they say it means childhood cancer. It doesn't mean armed forces, or did they change it? Let me look that up. Okay. Let me pull this up since it came into question. But yeah, another case of corruption, big surprise. And I'll show you what I just found. And this says, we see that yet? Okay. A yellow ribbon is a symbol of solidarity with soldiers in combat, political hostages, and other causes. Oh, other causes. I guess they've added to it. In the U.S., a yellow ribbon is a piece of yellow material somebody ties around a tree as a sign they are thinking about someone who has gone away, especially a soldier fighting in a war, or someone who was taken as a hostage or prisoner that they hope will return safely. So I guess maybe they've added to the yellow ribbon then. Maybe they've, I don't know, it could have multiple meanings. God knows anymore. God knows anymore. What do I know? What the hell do I know? Oh, before I forget, we talked about melee yesterday, didn't we? Self-defense. And we had talked about the scissors because I was asked to follow up on that. Because I was talking about if you had a steak knife or whatever, because that's what they like to use in the UK apparently, that scissors are better. Scissors are better. And you open them up, and I'll have to talk my way through this for people that are listening and not watching. And you hold one handle while it's open with the other handle against your wrist. And that gives you 2 offensive and 1 defensive position. Offensive position, stabbing down or thrusting forward with the blade, right? Forward, down. Defensive, because the scissors are open and you can catch things in between. You hold it that way so that you can't cut yourself because the blades are on the inside. Scissors are much better for defense than a typical knife in that regard, if you're having to defend yourself, especially if you're not really handy with a traditional knife, because most people do not hold them properly and they'll cut themselves. You do not want to hold a knife and try to stab someone and have that knife slide through your hand and slice open the inside of your fingers. And then you're helpless. Then you're just helpless. Some other things, and I've got them here. I've got a handful of things that I've got sitting here next to my keys for when I'm feeling frisky. That's a sap. A sap is a weight that can be on a leather strap, a spring, or a cord. Okay? Because it's flexible, as you can see. So you get some momentum there. This one is a solid piece of iron attached to a spring inside of a leather grip. That's a sap. This one is very dangerous to work with. With one like this, you really need to know what you're doing because you're talking potential lethal damage. Additionally, you can get the one, my wife has one, that's a leather strap with a pouch on the end with sand in it. Okay? And that's a little less dangerous than this one. And, you know, when you're talking potentially lethal, it depends on where the person is struck, typically around the head or back of the neck. The other type of sap is very similar to what is called a monkey ball or monkey fist, where you take a ball bearing and you weave paracord around it, which is not very easy to do. And then you make a strap of paracord and you can swing it around. Okay. And Flukeman says some thugs use machetes. No kidding. That's when you want your scissors, because then you can block. If it's a good pair of like shears, you could break a machete if it's just the standard garden variety. There's the detractable pole, the detractable baton. I'm not going to open it all the way up because a lot of these are a pain in the ass to close back up. You know, you snap it open and you've got a baton that you can whack somebody with. They can be a pain in the butt to close because, you know, as you swing them around, it expands. When you do close it, don't touch any of the connecting joints. You can get pinched. These are popular with a lot of people. Kubaton. There's various types. There's the type that has the two prongs. But, you know, the basic Kubaton, put your thumb across the top, wrap your fist around it, and you pound with this end. It helps you with a punch because it gives some solidity to your fist, but also swinging down with that peen. You want to talk about bruising somebody up, that'll do it. And then there's the knuckle dusters. And check state, city, and county, because not all places allow all things, and you can get in a lot of trouble in certain places for having something like this. But, you know, the classics, the knuckle dusters, which put a little bit of an exclamation point on your punch. What I do not recommend is belt buckles with a weapon. A lot of people like to do that. Like you'll see a belt buckle and it'll have knuckles on it or a knife. I don't like those. First, you're advertising that you have a weapon right off. Okay, number one. Number two is they can be difficult to access. The knives on a buckle are typically too small to handle safely unless it's a punch blade, which is illegal in a lot of places. Okay, because, you know, the one that goes between your knuckles, I have one, but I don't have one handy. Comes out between your middle fingers like this, and you're supposed to punch with that knife. A lot of places, it's illegal in a lot of places. But so those the ones that you have on belt buckles, a lot of those weapons are pretty useless or difficult to access, and they're on a fabric belt, and I don't like fabric belts. Bob says most, if not all, of that's illegal in the UK. Well, I'm in the South. And Baki wants an extendable baton. And Flukeman says you can get nicked for carrying anything in the UK. The best thing to carry is to wear rings with big heads. They can't stick you for those. You know what, Flukeman? I don't have one. You know those ball bearing necklaces? You ever seen them? It's like a 1/4-inch ball bearings. They make them so that you know you can't tear them apart. It's like a solid chain, but it's ball bearings, and it looks like a normal necklace, and it's a little bit long, and you can snap it off and whip with it. It's made to be a weapon. And Jane says, can't you just wear big rings? You could. I don't wear jewelry. I don't wear jewelry, though. But, you know, just to follow up with some of what we were talking about yesterday, since I was asked about it. And like I said, I have a few items that like sit over here, including a pocket knife, you know, traditional pocket knife. And a lot of people will carry a pocket knife, but, you know, they don't know how to use them anyways. But traditionally, you want to slash with a pocket knife. You don't want to stab, because you see how short that is. If I hit someone hard enough with a stab, it'll slide and I'll end up cutting my own fingers again. If you're, it's usually cutting, and that's actually why a lot of times you see a ridge on there. That's for your thumb, because you're doing a motion where you're almost making like a U motion when you snap at somebody or try to distract or cut, and then you switch to backhand because you want to be underneath right here, and you can get a hidden hand. And in knife fighting, I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself there, but in knife fighting, you know, if you're against someone else who knows what they're doing, you want to be backhanded, and you want to have your other hand over here. And that's why you would use a backhanded strike, because you want to make sure that the inside of your hand, the inside of your elbow, and the side of your neck and face can't be accessed. So you'd be like in here, and you'd snap out and slash, but there's a hook to it, so that you actually sort of carve. But most people don't know how to use a pocket knife, and they'll take a knife like this and they'll try to they'll try to go all Jason on you, and they think that this is what they're supposed to do, like they got a shank in the jailhouse, and they're like, oh, I'm in the chow line in jail, and I've got like a screwdriver and I'm stabbing. No, don't do that. You'll injure yourself more than anyone else. And Brian says most people pull out a knife to intimidate the other person. Yeah, but they don't know what they're doing. And Jane says that they give knife throwing classes at gun stores. Not that I've ever seen. They can be thrown. Even this one, I could throw it. You know, the balance isn't too far off. You know, it's going to be lighter on the hand. That's funny. It's actually a little heavier on the handle there. This one. I never threw this one. But yeah. And Baki says, great stuff. Thank you. Fluke Man says, how about toe cap shoes that'll hurt, especially between the legs? Well, I mostly wear welding boots anyways. I mostly wear welding boots. A lot of people don't like them because they're very heavy. Loyal says, once you draw blood, if it gets on your knife hand, it will be slippery. If the knife doesn't go in easily with your hand, will slide down and get a horrible cut. That's also why you want to slice. Because, yeah, if you did manage to stab, then you're going to get blood on you. But if you slice, you can control it a lot better. But that's what that's designed to do in the first place. That's what that's designed to do in the first place. And Brian made a donation to the channel. Thank you, Brian. Much appreciated as always. I wear either welding boots or mining boots. And if you give me 2 seconds here, I'll show you what I'm talking about, because I have my pair sitting here. Just to get put it into context for those of you who can see, I went and got my shoe. That's a welding boot. Steel toe, steel metatarsal guard, steel heel cap, steel shank. But people don't like this because they're heavy. Just this one shoe weighs over 4 pounds. But with a welding boot or a mining boot, mining boots are much taller though. They go up to almost your knee. But they're heavy, and people are like, oh, it's uncomfortable. But I'm used to it, so I don't care. I'm used to it, so I don't care. But you know, most people are used to wearing light footwear. I'm accustomed to the heavy footwear, so it doesn't bother me. But yeah, you kick anybody anywhere with this. I've seen them with a side guard too. These don't have that. But yeah, I'm comfortable like that. Anyways, with that, we didn't even get to the next story. With that, we are at the top of the hour. So I will go ahead and start signing off. No felines in the room. No, the cats left the room and they never came back. We'll have to wait till tomorrow. But I will go ahead and sign off. Special thanks to Brian for helping the channel out. Much appreciated. He made a donation today. And again, you know, we got our cat shelter going, so we need all the help we can get. And Baki says the heaviness of the boot makes for great physical training in addition to great defense. Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm used to running around in those. I'm comfortable. So great ankle support too, by the way. Yeah, light shoes I feel weird in almost now. Thanks again to everyone else who was able to join us here